So the domain 2, it covers the cloud data lifecycle, which we have shortly touch based yesterday. Then what are the different architectures on storages? What are the strategies? Then how a data discovery and the classification of data should be done from a life cycle perspective. How you will implement different regulatory protections or non-regulatory protections for your data. How you should have different policies for data retention, data deletion, and how you can audit. So these are the high level points which are covered in domain 2. So now in any organization, there are many roles which are responsible for data security. Okay, and these can vary organization to organization, because normally the data is generated by the business. Okay, and just to make everyone aware that the actual owner of the data is the business and not IT. I hope everybody is clear with this, because in many organizations there is a confusion that IT is the owner. No, information technology is a custodian of data, and they are responsible to take necessary measures to secure it. But the ownership of data always lies with the business and not with IT. Okay, so from each organization perspective, there can be different roles, because in some companies there are CISOs, CTOs, or the infrastructure managers or network administrators who are responsible for securing the data. It depends upon the structure of each organization and nature of business of each organization. Please make sure that you remember this life cycle with a mnemonics called CSUSD. This process is of utmost important. There is a definite questions in exam on the data security life cycle. So you should by heart the sequence, starting from creating the data. When data is created, it automatically has to be classified on the same stage, and then the data is stored. Now in any environment, whether it is a cloud environment or on-premise environment, normally create and store phase happens hand in hand. So the moment you create the data, it gets stored at the same stage. So it is like they go hand in hand. Then it is use of data or a processing of data. You share your data with other users. When the data lifetime is over, say it is no more required for a regular processing, it is archived. The archival is normally done as per the regulatory requirement or your organizational policies. It depends on the region or a geography, whether it is stored for 3 years or 5 years, and then data destruction. So as I have already explained yesterday, the questions can come that which phase of life cycle comes after create, or which comes before share, or in which phase the data is getting destructed. So there are definite minimum 2 to 3 questions on this, and this is a very important topic. You should focus more on the data life cycle. Okay, and for that, when the data is getting created, you have to map the different life cycle phases. You have to integrate it with the data locations where it is getting stored, because when you are storing a data, it is very important that the government regulations or the law of the land is followed. So if you are in India and the law of the land is not allowing you to store your data in US, you should not do that. Okay, so that plays a very vital role in your data classification and data security lifecycle. And you should have proper controls to protect your data. Now, as I was talking that when you are creating the data, you also need the definition to be done that who all will have access to the data, what is a potential location where it will be stored, and how you are going to protect it, what kind of controls, like certain users will have only read only access, certain users will have complete add modify delete access, certain users will have add and modify access but not a delete access. So that has to be defined in a structured way to avoid any data loss or any data leakage. Okay, so who will do what action, that also you need to define in the life cycle phase itself. It's very important that what kind of actions will be taken by what kind of role has to be defined in a proper way. In cloud, that becomes bit more tricky because on cloud, your data is stored in a third party premise. It is having a kind of a level of access to your environment, so the protection is more important. There are different types of storages based on which kind of cloud service you select. So for example, if you're going for infrastructure as a service as option, then you will have a storage as volume storage and object storage. So what's the difference? Normally in a volume storage, it's your normal database kind of a storage where your structured data is getting stored along with maybe your database originated files or your normal structured data. And other type is object storage. Okay, in object storage, normally if you go in say AWS, in AWS, S3 bucket is used for storing objects. So what is object? It is normally your files like images or your media files. They are getting stored on object storage. Okay, and as per each service provider, there are certain naming convention. Like in AWS, it is called Elastic Beanstalk. In Azure, it's called managed storage. So it depends. In Google, this object storage is called Google Drive. So from service to service is it differs. If you are not selecting infrastructure as a service and you are selecting platform as a service, then your storage of again of two types. It is structured storage and unstructured storage. Okay, it is similar that in a structured storage, your high degree of organizational data, like your RDBMS, like your structured databases are sitting, and in unstructured, it is used for processing big data. So that's the difference. Okay, in software as a service, you do not have much control because entire control is with the cloud service provider. So you do not have any control on what is stored on software as a service. That is defined by the cloud provider in case you are using software as a service. Okay, so on a cloud data storage, yesterday, we in one of the small discussion we discussed about the data dispersion. So what is data dispersion? Data dispersion is like it works like a RAID. So when we are having a storage on premise, normally you are configuring it with RAID 10 or RAID 5 to secure your data. So data dispersion is a RAID which is used on cloud. So how it works is it divides your data in a different small chunks, and they are stored in different locations on a cloud provider. So maybe if you are selecting India as your region, maybe your data is stored maybe in Mumbai, maybe in Bangalore, and it is sliced and dispersed in selected region. It gives you the data security and easy retrievation whenever it is required. And all this is done along with the encryption. Okay, so when you are doing the data storage on cloud, there are various types apart from what we discussed, like the structured storage, unstructured storage, which normally people are using. Like there is the content and file storage in AWS or Azure. If you are launching, say, your small services, it comes with a ephemeral storage, which is like a temporary storage which is associated with your server, and it gets erased the moment you are shutting down that instance. So that is not a permanent storage. Another important factor which comes with cloud services is content delivery network, which is kind of a service which is provided by the cloud provider, especially in case of when you are using the object storage. Like if the classic example is Netflix. When you are accessing Netflix or Amazon Prime, the content is stored on multiple networks, and it is delivered based on the region from where you are accessing. So today, if you are accessing, say, Netflix from India, then you are connected to the hub which is near to India. Tomorrow, if you move to US and you are accessing Netflix, then the content delivery network automatically senses your location, and it delivers you the content from the nearest hub in US. Now, this also helps to protect the delivery of the content where geographically, legally, it is not available. So there you see that there are certain movies, or there are certain series if on Netflix or on Amazon, if they are not allowed in a specific country or a region, you will not see them using the content delivery network. Okay. Normally on cloud, there is a major thing which is called long-term storage, which is used as a service for your data retention or archival. In AWS, it's called Glacier. So if you have a data to be stored, say, for 7 years, and it is not your regularly used data, then with a minimal cost, you can store that data on the long-term storage. Okay. Now, with these different kind of storages, there are certain threats which are normally experienced on any, whether you are on premise or on cloud. But here we are discussing mainly on cloud. So it's like unauthorized usage, unauthorized access, the DDoS or a DOS attack, the malware attacks, leakages. And this is where we have to be very careful on implementing a right data protection and a data leakage solution. Okay, so before we move on the next thing, I again want to touch base on encryption, because encryption is most important thing from a cloud perspective, and it is highly testable in exam. Because when you are using any cloud service, whether it is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, you have a connection happening from your on-premise to a cloud. So you need to make sure that your data is protected in motion, your data is protected at rest, and your data is protected when in use. Now, when you are having a data used in motion, normally you secure it using the IPsec VPNs or the TLS layer to secure when you are accessing any data. When data is at rest, you use the normal encryptions which are available with the cloud providers in case of you are using infrastructure or a platform as a service. And software as a service, you just make sure that there is encryption through your inquiry with a service provider. Now, there is a term which you guys should know, which is still in the evaluation phase, but this is happening where, normally when you are using any data, it is in unencrypted mode, whether you are on-prem or in cloud. So data in use normally does not have any encryption, but there is a term called homomorphic encryption. A very important thing which all of you should know, because this question comes, it is still in a evaluation phase. It is not fully implemented anywhere, but homomorphic encryption is for the data in use, and it is very soon going to get approved and deployed on the cloud providers, but currently it is in evaluation, and there is an expected question on this. It's simply they will ask what kind of encryption is suggested for data in use. Okay, so we have already discussed on the encryption challenges on cloud, that who will protect the key, how the software-based keys should be managed, how what are the options available with the cloud provider. Yesterday we discussed about the HSM, the hardware security module, where you can store your keys. It's a physical drive made available on cloud. Okay, so encryption is very important, and if from a CCSP book you are not getting the required information, I will recommend that you go through a CISSP CBK. It has given a good explanation on encryption, including the AES and DES and various standards of encryption which are used. Okay, and there are again, if you are using infrastructure as a service, what encryption is required, that how you will do it, and normally it is recommended if you are transferring any data from your premise to cloud, it is always recommended that you encrypt and then send. Okay, so let us move to the next point. So when we were discussing about encryption, please note that encryption, when you are selecting on cloud, or even that is applicable on premise also, but as we are right now discussing for cloud, please remember that encryption will definitely have an impact on your performance, because when you are accessing any data which is encrypted, then first you have to decrypt it, read it, and then when you are storing again, it has to get encrypted. So those functionalities has to be considered when you are deciding on your cloud operations. It's very important thing. So when you want to secure your data on cloud, there are various methods by which you can secure your data. It is like masking your data obfuscation, anonymization, tokenization. Okay, and this can be used on cloud as an alternative to encryption. Okay, so what is data masking? Data masking is normally, you guys must have seen when you are typing your credit card number or something, which there are certain numbers which are masked, where you see XXX coming, or when you are typing your password, you just get the dots. So it is called data masking or obfuscation. Okay, then sometimes you can do a random substitution, like you substitute the real world with the different characters. In case of random substitution, then you need to maintain your dual database, like if you are substituting hello with h3 exclamatory mark, which is shown here, if you see here. So if you are using this, then you need to have your data which is presented with this, and then you have your master data set which will have the real value stored. Then you have algorithmic substitution, where you are doing the main live data substituted with a defined algorithm. In that case also, you will have your master data set stored separately. Masking we have discussed. Deletion is normally you don't give your live data, or you don't store your live data. Okay, Now, data anonymization is a technique where you sanitize your information to protect the privacy. So in this, sometimes what happens is that if you want to use your data for your testing, you can use the data anonymization. Okay, so that will help that, okay, you can take your live data, you do anonymization, you mask it, or you remove the sensitive information and you give it, and you do it to protect your direct identifiers like name, email addresses, or any other PII related things. Okay, and mostly the thing which is used on cloud is tokenization. In tokenization, normally what happens is you maintain a separate token DB, and you maintain your application DB. So your tokenized data is one which is shared with the people. And when someone wants to access, the token server validates you as a user. And for that token data, it fetches the actual data and then presents it to the end user. So that is called data tokenization. This entire slide, what you are seeing on the method to protect data, is highly testable in exam, various methods, and which are used to where you can substitute certain things from encryption. So it's highly testable thing, and it is also important from discovering your data on a right framework. It's very important. Okay, so that brings, like, when you are creating data, it brings us to one more important thing, that how you will do the data classification. So now normally the data lifecycle phases what we discussed. So now data classification actually has to be done at the stage one, that is create. So when you are creating any data, you need to do the mapping of that data from a category perspective, that is it a sensitive data or a non-sensitive data, label it. When you do the labeling, then how are you going to store it as per the category of that data? Maintain that kind of security on a sensitive data, which will help you for a smooth discovery of the data. So if your data labels are done properly, you can also define the access control. So for example, if you have defined a data as a sensitive data, then you will have a access control. And there are also certain models which are followed on the access control, which are defined in CCSP, like the Clark Wilson model, DIBA model, all these, but these are not testable in CCSP, but these are good to know. So if you want to learn more on the data security models, you can again refer the CISSP framework. Okay. If your labeling is not done properly, okay, you will have a issue in your data discovery. Like, you will have a poor data quality. You will not know which is a sensitive data, which is not a sensitive data. Your dashboards will be messed up. You will have a hidden cost by way of penalties if your sensitive data is not protected. So it's very, very, very important to have a proper data labeling done. And as per the data labeling, data protection tools to be implemented to protect the data. It's very important. Now, when you do a classification and implement a data discovery, you have a tools like the information rights management and data rights management, that is IRM and DRM, which help you to protect your data from unauthorized access. And there are many tools available in the market which can help you to protect on data leakages. And these are the tools which you need to select from your governance perspective, which is mandatory from the law of the land. Okay, now the last part of data security is your data retention and protection policies. Now, as you are categorizing the data in a life cycle, you also define the period for which the data should be retained from a legal perspective. And if your data is not sensitive, then your organizational policy need to define that what kind of retention for a data should be there. So normally, if the legally required data is there, then your data is available on the system, say for 5 years, and for next 10 years, it is retained as a archive record. So you need to have those definitions, and as per that, your data has to move from one stage to another, where your security posture for that data has to change automatically. So if your data is in use, your security is different. If your data is in archival, your security posture is different. Your access rights change. So that is very important from the retention perspective. For what I have already discussed, it is mentioned here that when you are defining your policies, what is the legal requirement, what are the regulatory requirements, and what are the standard requirement. What is the difference between a legal and regulatory is legal requirements are defined by the country specific laws. Like, there are legal requirements on GDPR, there are legal requirements on HIPAA, there are legal requirements of FISMA, and on regulation, it is like PCI DSS. It is not a legal requirement, but PCI DSS calls for retention of data for a specific period. So these are regulatory requirements. Then there are certain standard requirements which are different from organization to organization perspective. So when you define your retention policy, you do your classification, you determine your period, you determine the procedure, because if your data is sent to a archival and you need to retrieve that data, you also need to define the policies to retrieve that data. So if you are say in cloud, you have sent your data in, say, Amazon Glacier, where you have three different categories on which you can retrieve your data. Like in your category one, you can retrieve your data in, say, few hours. The second category is within 12 hours, and then the third category is more than a week. What is your backup process for this archived data? And then you need to have your monitoring and audit to be done on this data classification. So from audit trail, you need to make sure that the data is accessed by the right set of people. It's not modified by the illegal people. It is not downloaded or it is not transferred to the unauthorized people. So all these logging and chain of custody need to be maintained. Now, this data retention is also important from legal perspective, because in case of legal cases, the retrieval has to be done within a defined time period. So it's very important portion. And for that, normally from a protection policies, there is another kind of agreement which is normally done with the cloud provider, which is very highly testable in exam, called privacy level agreement. So normally a cloud provider declares that the personal data protection and security that he is maintaining from his service perspective. So CSP is communicated that what kind of services he is offering, what kind of access level and compliance he is providing, and what is the contractual protection he is giving to the cloud customer. So based on that, the end user also can define what kind of access rights or protection he need to provide to its end users. So the last point on this is on cloud, which we have also discussed yesterday, is on cloud, the data destruction is possible only through crypto shredding, or it is possible with overwriting, but overwriting is not a safe way. So if you want your cloud data to be destroyed in a safe way, the only safe possible way is crypto shredding. It's highly testable, and you should know how the crypto shredding works. Okay. So that brings us to the end of domain 2. So this is the first question. So in which of these options does the encryption engine reside within application accessing the database? The correct answer is C, application level encryption. Please go through the question number 2. On this question, I don't think it is kind of a tricky question which is asked typically in the exam. It looks like a very straightforward question, and the answer for this is option C. Now, why option C? Please pay attention to what is asked. So they are asking that you want to implement an event monitoring, security information management, security event management solution in your production environment in order to acquire better data for security defense decisions. Okay, and you want to implement this in cloud. So when you want to do this, what is most important or most significant concern what you have is that you need to check with your cloud provider that this tool is acceptable in his environment as a solution, because you are going to install a third party tool and it is functioning, or it is going to function properly on his cloud environment. So if you are implementing something on AWS and you have, say, any a logarithm or say SolarWinds kind of a third party tool, you first need to check with the cloud provider whether it is going to function properly. That is the most significant thing for you to take your decision, and this is a typical cloud architect hat which you need to wear for this. Okay, so let us move to question 3. So which of the following is not a step in crypto trading process? The correct answer for this is C. Rest all are required to be followed in a sequence for a crypto sharding. Let's move to question 4. So correct answer on the DRM is D. Why D is because when you are implementing the solution, okay, and you want to implement it as a cloud customer or a cloud end user, it is not of that important for you as a challenge that who is going to be the owner of intellectual property. Okay, because rest of the points are important from the point of view of properly using the DRM solution. So that is why the correct answer is D. Should we move to the next question? So the next question is on your screen. So this is, I think, one of the most simplest question if you can be lucky to have on exam. And yes, the answer is B. Great. So data dispersion is a technique which is used on cloud, same like RED, where the data is stored on different cloud environments using the encryption key. Data is dispersed, and when you are using it, automatically is collated and presented to the end user in a transparent way. The next question is on your screen. The correct answer is volume storage. Volume storage is normally used when you are selecting the infrastructure as a service as an option to implement your production environment in cloud, where you need a maximum access or maximum control of the environment to configure your applications on cloud. So yes, volume storage is a correct answer. Let's move to next question. Again, this is kind of a very simple and straightforward questions. So when you are implementing a DRM, it is mainly used to protect all kind of material or all kind of solutions which is related to intellectual property. Let's move to next question. So if you remember our last session, this is what I explained you when we were discussing about the data life cycle on cloud. And these are kind of a questions which are normally asked. So yes, your answer is right. The store is the phase which come as a second stage of the CSUSD cycle, which immediately happens once you create a data. Let's move to next question. So this is another example which I explained. If you by heart the mnemonics CSU, SD, these are the quick wins and easy wins for you in exam. So the correct answer here is C, use. So what comes, okay, before share is CSU. SAD. So share phase comes after use. So what comes before share is use. So when you use data, that comes before share. Okay. Let's go to the final question. The correct answer here is volume storage. Okay. So why volume storage? Because please understand that you are storing a data in a logical storage assigned. Okay, in a content delivery network, the storage is assigned in a respective geography to pull the data in a better way, in a faster way. Okay, and volume storage is logically connected to your compute. It's not physically connected. Okay, so the correct answer is volume storage. Okay, content delivery network is normally used, if you remember, like I explained, it is normally used in the content distribution kind of services like Netflix or Amazon Prime, something like that, where you know your contents are accessed across different countries and you want a faster access and you want a different rule, then the content delivery network is the faster way to address this. But here the question is that you are storing a data and you are not necessarily having it from a same geography. So if you are having your cloud environment on say Ireland region, your compute might be in one proximity data center in that region in a availability zone, and your volume storage can be in a different availability zone. That is quite possible. Okay.